Hi, I'm John, and today, May 9th, is Goku Day in Japan. I wanted to make something special for it, and the one thing that came to my mind was a fit we never got as a figure, his casual outfit from the driving episode, one of the most popular filler episodes of Dragon Ball Z. So, I decided to take this dinky Dragon Ball superhero DXF Goku figure and sculpt and paint the outfit on myself. If you clicked on the thumbnail, you'll see that I made it through to the end. But I'm going to be honest with you, I had a really tough time on this one. And you're going to hear about it. Anyway, first things first, I had to make some carrot soup. The figure is pliable and flexible after sitting in the hot water, so I'll be replacing his wristbands with some plain old wrists. It's also important to use a fresh, sharp X-Acto knife blade to make cuts extra smooth like butter. After that, I had to make room for some cool 90s jeans and a button down. So, again, while the figure was still warm, I went in and trimmed down the pants, cutting them down as close as I could without cutting off the legs. I debated at the time whether or not I should just make the legs from scratch, but I figured this would keep the figure's original proportions. If I ever decide to do this again, I'll have to revisit this thought. Next, I did the same to his shirt, but this time I kept the bits on his upper back and shoulder area since I sort of liked the way it looked. Now that I trimmed off some of the extra fat, it's time to start sculpting. For this sculpt, I went with a product called Apoxie Sculpt, and it's incredibly affordable, and it comes with a bigger bulk package than something like Tamiya Epoxy Putty. You might be asking yourself, why use this instead of something like traditional clay? With something like Super Sculpty, which requires an oven bake, you can't put a plastic figure in the oven or else it'll melt. And differently than air dry clay, epoxy putty only starts to dry once you mix equal parts of A and B together. One additional benefit of using epoxy putty is that it's incredibly hard and durable after it dries. With that being said, I had an incredibly hard time using this Epoxie Sculpt product, especially when smoothing it out and trying to sculpt in any small details. I probably should have switched products at this point, but I decided to truck through it. Once I finished the socks, I super glued his boots back onto his legs and started sculpting the jeans. I went in and started to bulk his legs out and tried my best to sculpt in any creases in the jeans. If I'm being honest, I was pretty disappointed with my initial pass on the creases since I put too many folds in the pants, making them sort of look like sweatpants. In addition to that, the surface was incredibly rough and bumpy, but I figured I could try to fix it later. I also tried to make stitching in his jeans, using a technique where you can make a softer cut into the clay by placing cling film wrap on top and pressing your lines through it. It's something that I picked up from one of my favorite YouTube channels, North of the Border, but I sculpted the lines crooked, and because of the sticky nature of the epoxy sculpt, I couldn't smooth it out to start over again. So I also figured I would try to fix it later. After considering this first pass of the jeans complete, I moved up the body to work on his button down. First, I placed the bottom of his shirt to be as close to anime accurate as I could. Then, moving up the body, I tried to place the actual button-down area of the shirt using the same cling wrap technique as I did on the pants, and tried to smooth it out as best as I could. Moving on to sculpting the collar. I think sculpting collars in general was harder than I expected, and on top of that, the epoxy sculpt was again too sticky or not sticky enough, and I just could not get the pieces to stick and blend the way that I wanted them to. If I ever decide to do something like this again, I'll have to reconsider this and use a different product. Before moving on to the sleeves, I wanted to take this opportunity to try to fix the stuff that I wanted to fix at this point. To try to fix the creases in the pants, I tried adding additional pieces of putty for more pronounced creases to make them more jeans-like, but added them to the point where it looked worse. Then, to try to fix the lines I made earlier, I added some long pieces of putty down the outside and inside of each leg to act as seams for the jeans. Then, to try to fix the lumpiness and roughness issues I had with the sculpt, I smothered a bunch of Tamiya basic putty over the entire sculpted portions that I did, hoping that when I sanded it down, it would look a lot smoother. While I sand this down, I just wanted to let everyone know that if you're interested in getting started in customizing, everything I'm using in this video will be linked in the description below, aside from this epoxy sculpt, which I can't recommend to anyone. If you do purchase anything on Amazon using the links below, it'll help me and the channel out with no additional cost to you. But do feel free to take this list and shop at your local hobby shop and support small business. Thanks in advance, and back to my headache. At the end of the day, after sanding down the entire figure, I still wasn't really happy with the results, especially with the jeans. I figured that it would be impossible for me to sculpt something more detailed like his sneakers using this epoxy sculpt. So I took a pause and made this Ultra Ego Vegeta figure in the meantime. After having such a good experience using Tamiya epoxy putty on that figure, I had a rejuvenated confidence that I could use that to sculpt the sneakers. So I did just that, and I had a much better time. I was so happy to sculpt in a lot of the finer details, especially the shoelaces. Then, I used Epoxy Sculpt to sort of bulk out the portions that I needed, and then went in with the Tamiya Epoxy Putty to do the finer details, like the folds in the armpit area. I was incredibly grateful for this pause because somehow I realized how I can actually make his jeans work. So I took an X-Acto knife and basically shaved off and carved down all the bits that I hated, reshaping the pants to make them actually look right. I knew that the way that I was shaving off those sections that I can easily use some sandpaper and smooth out my cuts. And I was right. After some off-screen sanding, I used some Tamiya liquid surface primer to smooth out any small imperfections that I may have missed. How this is a little bit different than regular paint primer is that this Tamiya surface primer actually has some small granules in there that'll help fill in any small imperfections. The great thing about this product is that you can apply surface primer to see if there are any larger imperfections that this can't fix. Then, with those larger sections, you take the Tamiya basic putty that I used earlier and then sand down the entire figure again. Rinse and repeat until you have a finish that you're satisfied with. However, being mentally done with sculpting this figure, I only did one pass. And then I moved on to painting. First, I primed the rest of the figure that I didn't sculpt using some Vallejo surface primer. Then I painted his eyes, undershirt, and sneakers with some white paint. Moving on to the pants, I painted a base coat of Ultramarine Blue. Then, with a mix of black and flat red, I painted a base coat for his shirt. It's at this point I would like to take an opportunity to show why I like to take my figures apart, then paint them, and then put them back together. It is so hard to paint underneath certain sections, especially the shirt and underneath his arms, without getting any paint on any other sections. Moving on to painting the skin, I painted on a base coat using some flat flesh. Moving on to his socks, I noticed that in the episode, he's wearing some really rad red-orange socks, so I painted them using a mix of flat red and clear orange. Not wanting to waste any of the paint that I mixed, I used this mix of flat red and clear orange to dry brush a lighter coat on his shirt. Moving back to his shoes, I mixed together some white and lemon yellow to paint his sneakers. Next, to dry brush the jeans, I wanted to mute the loudness of this Ultramarine Blue, so I mixed together some flat blue, Stonewall Gray, and Azure and dry brushed and layer on top. I unfortunately don't have a fixed ratio of paints for whatever I'm using. I just keep mixing different combos until it looks just right. Moving back to the skin, I dry brush the combo of light flesh and flat flesh to get a color that doesn't look too pale. Getting close to the finish line, it was time to paint the eyes. so I went in with a ball stylus and black paint to paint the pupils, as well as painting in the eyebrows. Continuing to add some details, I went in and added triangles on his shirt using a darker mix of flat red and black. This was so tedious that I sort of made a mental note never to customize a cell figure. Getting to the finer details, next is my favorite part of any figure painting, using Tamiya panel liners. Per usual, I used brown panel liner on his facial features around his eyes, mouth, and chin. Then I used some pink brown panel liner on his ears, neck, arms, and hands. I also went in and used some orange-brown panel liner on his shoelaces to help make them pop a little more. I'm not sure how helpful it was, but just did it for completeness sake. Then I cleaned up all my lines using some Tamiya X20 enamel thinner. The last thing to do is to put his hair back on, which I painted black off screen. And we're done. Here's the final product. If you made it here after my incessant whining, congratulations and thank you for coming with me on this journey. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. At the end of the day, I really am satisfied with the final product. The figure itself is a little small, but I'm happy that I now have a figure of Goku in this outfit. I'll probably take a break from doing something so ambitious like this for a while, but it was a great learning experience for the potential next times that that I can do something like this. Sorry. Again, as a reminder, I have a list of everything I used in today's video in the description. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe for more of these kinds of videos. If you're interested in getting started in customizing your own figures, feel free to ask any questions in the comments. I try to be pretty active there, and I'll try my best to help. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Hey, it's me, Goku!